Hey there, happy National Women Chiropractors Day. I hope it's been an awesome day for you. If you haven't caught my other interviews, I invite you to do so. I've had a blast. Some of the women that I've interviewed, I've known better than others, and every single interview I've learned something new and will be applying it to my life directly or to help others. It's also been really fun. Like I started last night with Dr. Lucy Clary, who practices in Australia, then bounced to Kansas, and we've had South Carolina and Atlanta, Georgia, and Texas, and now south of me, but north of probably most of you, in Canada. So Dr. Liz Anderson-Peacock is joining me for this interview. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and happy International Women Chiropractors Day.
Thank you. What a special time for all of us. And just, obviously both genders are incredibly important in our profession. And I think it's so fun to see just how much women have come together in the last 10 or 15 years compared to like when we got into practice. I feel like we were much more islands back then than what we have now. So if you would let's start with just giving those who maybe don't know your journey. Where did you go to school, and what's your journey in chiropractic been like?
Okay, well, initially I got into chiropractic because I had sort of one of those pivotal moments and really was looking at chiropractic, but was really also looking at more neuroscience and microsurgery and things like that. And I hadn't really decided. And I thought if I went into chiropractic, maybe I should go to a chiropractor first and see what they do. And kind of made sense to me. And I also, when I went, I actually had hurt my back. So I was also motivated to go at that point because that's kind of what I thought it was. And I had this life-changing moment where there was just this insight and this beautiful marriage, if you will, of being able to use your academics and artistic nature of delivering an adjustment and sort of I like to say it's a game of Clue with trying to figure out what's going on with the person. And I say a person versus a patient and the environment that they're in. And it's sort of putting these puzzles together. And I really liked the way that sort of worked with my mind. And I also liked somewhat of that independence where I could work on my own and sort of carve my own way and my own niche and that sort of thing. So went into CMCC and graduated from there in 1986. So I'm probably a well-seasoned chiropractor to many of the people here. And initially it was really tough. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't, because it was almost like all of my passion and my reason and my philosophy that I understood chiropractic to be was sort of drummed out of me, or I like to be Anywho, so I was really, I don't want to say I was failing in practice, but I was so miserable in practice when I first started. And I remember thinking, if I don't get help, I'm going to leave the profession, because this is not at all what I thought it was going to be. And I remember some of my classmates were doing extremely well, and they got themselves a very sort of, I'm going to say a very academic slash, well, actually triad balanced coach, and where they really looked at the science, they looked at the art, they looked at the philosophy, and they married it all together, and they made you take responsibility and helped you with being organized. And literally I went from going to leave the practice and the profession to a waiting list practice. Like I moved my relationship, I moved my practice to a different city, and within 6 months I was full for decades. And then I sold that practice to my kid. One of our daughter became a chiropractor, married a chiropractor. So they took over that big practice. Very early on in practice, I was the first Canadian with a diplomate in pediatrics. So that was back in the 90s. And so I really became known for seeing kids, and I started teaching about seeing kids and in all sorts of different realms. Anyways, long and the short, I now have a very small boutique pediatric practice, which lets me keep my fingers in the pie, doing what I love to do, which is seeing kiddos, trying to figure out the puzzles of children as they are and their families. And I've been doing a lot of other things. I mean, I've sat politically regulatory wise. I have written consensus documents. I've done, all sorts of things, steering committee work with practice guidelines. I've taught for the ICPA, I've taught for the ICA, I've taught for all sorts of different groups. And I'm also a coach. And a couple years ago, I also had an amputation. So there you go. So now I'm the Fembot Chiro.
That's awesome. So can we go back? I want to speed bump to the beginning of the journey, to when we started losing connection a little bit. Of, you graduated with these, like, chiropractic can do everything. Like, I remember when I went to chiropractic college, I was raised in a chiropractic family, in that, like, I started getting adjusted when I was a year and a half, and my dad always wanted to be a chiropractor, but him and mom got married really young. And so they had 3 children to attend to real quickly. And so he didn't go to chiro school then. And so I'd always been raised like, well, yeah, chiropractic, like, it kind of cures everything. Like, that's what you do. And then I remember going to chiropractic college, and I seriously remember calling my cousin, who was a chiropractor, and practice. And I was like, what happened? Like, I thought it does all of that. Like, what kind of happened? And it sounds like that's almost what happened to you when you got into practice. And you and I both know, like, that happens really commonly. We're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and then you get into practice, and then it just feels like this weight comes over you, and this doubt and all of that. If we can go back there, Liz, can you remember, what was the sign, now that you look at it, that you started down that journey? So if there's a woman watching this, she can hear what some of those signs are and go, whoa, now I know, like, this is the detour I don't want to take.
Right. Well, for me, it was just this, I felt like I was starting to just fix and patch people up. And I think that's where I was really frustrated, is it didn't fit with my experience. My experience was prior to that, meaning prior to individual practice on my own when I just graduated, was more about this connection with people, that when you allowed them to connect from within and you supported that connection by other things, they all of a sudden had this different vitality and this ability to express life. And it wasn't there to cure everything. It wasn't that at all. What it was it allowed through the nervous system functioning well, allowed the body to interpret and respond more appropriately to the environment. And yeah, we do need to look at our environment. So for me, the thing was this disconnect between what I had, what my experience was, and what my reality had become, and just being very frustrated with this, hey doc, give me a fix or a crack, like that kind of a mentality. And I would say that I'm not sure, I guess I attracted it from my slow movement into that way of practice, which was part of the training. And I'm appreciative of many things in my training. I just wish it had more balance to it and preparation for the real world. So for me, it was really that uncomfortable feeling of feeling like, oh my God, what have I just done? Do I really want to spend a whole career doing that? And the answer for me was no. And so the hardest thing was to sort of face the feeling of being a failure when I knew I wasn't, and figuring out where I needed to go and ask for help. And so I think that's something that most women can really relate to, is the fear of failure, or the imposter syndrome, if you will, and then learning how to ask for help, because so many of us have been maybe modeled in environments where it's like, be tough, be strong, be a big girl, put your big pants on, whatever it might be, whatever molding and sculpting. And I think that this new generation is very fortunate in many ways, because there is this new way of connecting and an allowance of vulnerability, which I think is beautiful, because everybody has stuff, right?
So much.
That's the funniest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to think you're the only one in it is sort of like this bizarre detour that I'm not sure where we get that from. And maybe it's partly because of our training, is that we're supposed to have the answers for our patients. If we don't have the answers, we know what to do. We have a map that we map out for our patients. But when it comes to us personally, we don't necessarily apply it the same way. Maybe that's the challenge.
You bring up so many just amazing points. So the one thing I first want to, like, kind of tag off of this or jump off of this. It was funny. I connected and you weren't on yet. Like we were just obviously having a difficulty with connecting. And so my lights in my office keep going out, and my cleaning lady is here. And then I also have the window washer, this awesome husband and wife team that come and just like do an amazing job. And I walked out and I'm like, are the lights going on and off for you guys? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh, because it's like a party in my office. Like, I think we just need the disco ball and we'll start dancing or something. And while you're speaking there, it made me think of, do you remember dances when we were in like junior high, right? And there were the wallflowers who all were on the outside watching and critiquing those of us who were in the middle, not knowing what we were doing, but we were having a really great time, right?
Right.
And I think it's really easy when we get into practice to feel like we have to control it. And so we're going to be on the outside and critique the body versus just jumping in and doing the dance with our practice members and just like leaning into the process and connecting innate to innate and just being still. I'm reading, you've probably read this book. I'm listening to it, I should say. Stillness is the Key. Have you read that one?
Beautiful. I have not. So I love the title though.
Yes, stillness is the key. And just like being present with our practice members to me is like being in the dance and having a good time and not really knowing what's the next song going to be, but I'm just going to be right here with this practice member. And I think sometimes when we first get into practice and then we start getting in our head and we're overthinking it, it puts us on the wall, standing and critiquing instead of being involved. And the next thing you brought up that I think is so important during this COVID and during the racial unrest in the US right now is to remember, like, everyone's going through something. Everyone is going through something. And the people that you think have it all together, like, they have all their own doubts just as much as the individual who's watching. I said to somebody the other day, my husband and I were running errands, and I'm doing that 50-year-old, put on some weight, not quite as active as I used to be, that whole thing, and just, doubt. And I said, we stopped and my husband ran in to go to a store. And when he came back, I finally said to him, I'm like, do you know why I didn't go in with you? And he's like, no. I'm like, because I feel like you'll be embarrassed if I walk in because like the old lady's with you. And the person like that I was talking to, they're like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, I'm not kidding. And I only say that to say, like, we all have stuff that we're working through. And so if we can just be, like you said, vulnerable and transparent and lead with kindness and lead with love and we're all just like bumping into each other while we're still trying to figure it out. And I love having watched your journey over these last few years. And, as a young doc, I was always like, oh, Dr. Liz, like, wow, she's like the bomb. And undoubtedly you were working through all your stuff too, right? Which is where I want to go next. What is the greatest challenge that you have faced? And what's it taught you?
I would say literally being present and recognizing that the universe is safe and to stop trying to control everything. Those were probably my biggest things, because I used to stress myself out with trying to control having, my staff up to par and me up to par and trying to figure out all these answers for patients. And all of a sudden I'm like, why? It's their life. They're responsible for their life. Why am I taking on their stuff? And it was really turning it around to learning how to ask the right questions to hold other people accountable for their own things that they need to do. Mm-hmm. And then letting go of how the outcome is supposed to come. So I do a lot of work with Joe Dispenza.
Uh-huh.
I'm really follow a lot of his work. I practice a lot of those meditations. And I will tell you that in applying all of that, I have learned to, for me, what works the most is stay in the vibration of grace, stay in the vibration of joy, stay in the great vibration of gratitude, thankfulness, and love. And when I'm there and I'm really present, all sorts of magical things happen. So literally when I had my amputation, for those that don't know me, I had a right below knee amputation. And that was probably the easiest thing I've ever done, because it's the first time in my life I had to let go of the outcome, because I didn't know what was going to happen when. I had to trust, I couldn't control, all I could control was my response to any of the outcomes. But I knew I was inherently safe in the environment. And I knew if I stayed in gratitude for all the little things that I was taking for granted, that would speed up many more things. And when I would literally connect with that same vibration of gratitude, I would have had all of these things starting to come to me versus me having to force and work and control and goal set and go. And those, some of those things are needed at times. But in letting so many of these things go while holding that vibration, it was magical. I mean, I've got stories upon stories that would take too long right now, and I'm writing a book on it. And I guess that's really what I want to say, is that sort of letting go of that outcome. And it's like an adjustment, right? Is when you adjust, you cannot say with absolute certainty what is going to happen. What you can is have an intention and a focus, and know that in adjusting with the nervous system, that the body is going to be able to reorganize its own tissue in a different way. I have a grandson who's popping up around me here. And so I think that that's really, really key, is letting go of those things that we don't need to control, and get back into our hearts and get really super present.
I love that, of leaning in and being in flow. And with the adjustment, I was just thinking of, who are we to say we know what it's supposed to do? Like, our job is just to locate correct vertebral subluxation. The body's got it figured out. Like, it just reminded me, it just, like, it took an error and I didn't even think about it. Like, it's kind of got it's got it figured out, right? And I love that
Yeah.
idea of grace, and just being graceful to ourselves as well as others. Let me ask you this: when you sense yourself going back to the old patterns, the rigidness, what is your strategy to slip to, like, say, I recognize what it is, I'm going to pivot so I can go back into this state?
Right. So for me, probably the best, yes, I'm on an interview. I have a bunch of family arriving here. For me, probably the best thing that has happened is meditating. And that has been the easiest thing for me to work on. Breathing.
Mm.
Oh, I see you talking as I'm talking here.
Mm-mm.
Okay, there we go. All right, so for me, the easiest thing has been to recognize the sensation in my body, because that's the biggest key. And in recognizing the sensation, it doesn't mean I have to go into it. It's a matter of what would I prefer. And then I now have done it enough that either I can breathe or I can think of something and get back into my heart center, and that will reset me. But daily practice, I meditate. I will, the more I'm in nature, the more I'm well grounded. Create space for myself. I love my downtime. When I say downtime, it's time for me. It's never down. I'm doing something. Sometimes it's creativity. So I'll sometimes paint, I'll do things along those lines. So I think there are a lot of strategies that people have as resources that they may not recognize that they do have. Even, even 5 minutes of breathing, 3 minutes of breathing for some people will shift them around.
Nice. I love that. And the cool thing about it, you can do it anywhere, anytime. Like right now, if you're out in public and somebody triggers you, you can stop and breathe for 3 minutes and then act. But just like give yourself that little pause and recognize that that person is needing to have a little pause as well. I know your family's there. So as we wrap this up, what message do you most want our chiropractic sisters to hear from you today on this special National Women Chiropractors Day? What do you want to leave them with?
Let me think.
Okay.
I want you to know that you are far more creative and resourceful than you've ever given yourself credit for. So find a time to be present with you and allow the universe to work through you. And when you do that, grace and joy and insight, I think, really show up big time.
I love that. So cool. Dr. Liz, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry with this connection. I'm on this island in the middle of nowhere using my cell phone without any Wi-Fi. So it's a little different.
That's the best. And we're going to let you get back to it. To all of you, thank you for joining us today. Happy National Women Chiropractors Day. God bless you all. And we'll see you later. Bye.